Please welcome our next guest, Michael Weiss, who works as partner and leader of forensic services and anti-financial crime at PwC Luxembourg. Michael leads financial crime and forensic projects, as well as being responsible for forensic technology missions in relation to data leaks or other IT-related attacks. He has led a series of high-profile fin crime investigations and compliance implementation programs as a key component of his project experience. Michael is a subject matter expert on complex anti-money laundering and forensic matters as a key member of various industry working groups on fraud and as a founding director of the Luxembourg chapter of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. He says, "You don't know what you don't know. If you want to operate effective compliance and anti-financial crime programs, you have to appreciate the very meaning of that in order to be prepared."
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Artificial intelligence is transforming the way how we work and live. And it also poses significant risks, obviously. And it's very important, it's essential for us to understand what those risks are in order to mitigate them appropriately. Now, this opening line is actually a line that was generated by artificial intelligence because I asked ChatGPT to write me an opening line for my speech today. It's pretty good at that, as you see, because there was a whole variation of answers that I could have selected. And for us operating in the field of anti-financial crime, it will be very important to understand properly what are the capabilities of artificial intelligence, what are the limitations, and what are the risk factors, obviously. Now let's look at it. Here there's one of my favorite quotes. Artificial intelligence is more artificial than intelligent. Well, that was very funny and was very true not so long ago. And I must admit, I used to be a skeptic of artificial intelligence. That dramatically changed recently because artificial intelligence and ChatGPT in particular took the world by storm, as we all know. Of course, the use cases in the past were not always that appropriate, and it worked more in theory than in practice. But in nowadays, the systems are so powerful and so performant that they can be quite different to what we used to see, and they will make a difference going forward. So what is generative AI? It's a subset of deep learning that involves training a model to generate new data that is similar to the training data it was given. So it's basically meant to generate any type of content. You name it, it has it. So it ranges over art, music, text, entire virtual worlds even. And it does so by applying, amongst other things, natural language processing and large language models. And those are generating this amazing content that we see more and more. How is that possible? Not so long ago it wasn't, because simply the computing power needed and the data needed to train those models was not handleable. But today it's still very expensive, but the computer chips are so performant and the training data that is used is basically the internet. So it's huge. It can't get any bigger than that. And that provides a very, very broad landscape of applications that we can think about. So the landscape and the companies that offer AI and generative AI services is mushrooming. It's huge. So it ranges from text generation, video, image generation, code programming, etc., etc. So you name it, it's there, and companies are offering it, and it's evolving by the day as we speak. So let's look at it a bit more in detail what that actually means. So the potential to generate significant efficiencies in a number of different ways has already been seen in a lot of use cases and examples. So the content generation is very strong. Content review and analysis is very impressive. It drafts documents. It can review and analyze advanced search terms. It can manage knowledge quite efficiently and produce a lot of content that is immediately handy to use. It can even program and write computer code. And that's where it starts also to be interesting. So I'm a forensic investigator. So when you want to perform as a standard task as part of the investigation, an analysis of large Excel files or large transactional data, you want to find out what are the potential fraudulent transactions. Doing so can be done with data scientists that write you a nice VBA script that would detect all those things. Now, if you don't have a data scientist at hand, You ask ChatGPT, like in this example, and it provides you within seconds a nice script that detects all the red flags that indicate potentially fraudulent transactions at the snip of a finger. And it fulfills the standard application that we would apply for fraud investigations. So that is very powerful, and you don't need to be any longer a programmer or a computer literate at the high end in order to work with those sophisticated tools. So that provides huge benefits, obviously. Looking at the landscape a bit more in general, you see that there is a whole broad range of use cases how to enhance anti-financial crime measures. So there's document analysis, summarizing texts, even analyzing the sentiment of text. So what are they talking about? But we also use that in the context of e-discovery reviews, for instance, where you are searching large volumes of unstructured data, typically emails, for keywords in order to find out who said what, when, to whom, and who is responsible ultimately. So to find the famous smoking gun. Doing so can be significantly improved by artificial intelligence because today it is usually still a very tedious and cumbersome manual process. You can also look at interviewing. It can support that significantly. Technology we saw. And then another interesting use case is reporting and outreach, because most of generative AI tools that we see, ChatGPT being one, are chatbots in the end. So you can actually use that in KYC remediation projects, for instance, where you need to collect a lot of missing information from customers, what banks often have to do, to manage and to make this outreach to clients more efficiently to collect the information. On the other angle, when it becomes more quantitative, you can have anomaly detection. Because here, when you combine different measures, generative AI and classical machine learning tools, you can identify unusual patterns very efficiently, you can risk classify, you can do predictive analytics, etc., etc. So it's really broad in use of application. But the core essence of ChatGPT and alikes could also be to act as a virtual SME, a subject matter expert. Because if you have a tricky technical question, you ask the system, you get the answer if it's fed with the right information from policies, procedures, or technical documentation that might be at hand. And last not least, you have negative news screening, which is one of the headaches for a lot of financial institutions, because typically negative news screening results in a lot of false positives. So if the AI is helping you to identify which of the hits are actually just content related and not context related in the right way, so are producing white noise, you can eliminate them quite easily. So there are a lot of strong use cases that we can use it for, but there's always a but. We need to understand what are the limitations of the technology for the time being in particular. So the tools that are used and that are there are quite powerful, but they are still under development. So they are good, they are getting better, but they are not perfect yet, they are not error-prone. The models that are used are not always consistently producing the same results. So if you use a different model for the same data, you might get different data output for it. That is not very helpful in a regulated context, in particular, when you need to trust the output and the data. And the summaries or content that is produced is not always accurate or complete or both. So that is a big risk, obviously, when you're not able to spot that, because the systems can hallucinate. So they are able to provide extremely important and extremely convincing content that is complete rubbish when you look at the content side, but which looks very professional. And that is, of course, risky when you cannot spot that. Systems can imitate, like what I would say a smart pupil would do in an oral exam. So if you ask the question, you don't know the answer, you still give an answer, but you avoid the subject that you don't know. And that's what those tools are sometimes doing as well. So the human factor to control it is still important and cannot be neglected at this time. And then there is, of course, the data side of things. I mean, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, still applies. So that also refers to the training data that is used for those models, because all data on the internet is a lot. Not all is good data or is accurate data. But also when you upload information into the systems in order to get certain answers out of it, what happens to this data actually? Is security ensured? Is it still used in a proper way? Are secrecy or privacy rules respected? So there are a lot of considerations that we need to be aware of. And exactly for those reasons, you need to consider that artificial intelligence, and generative AI in particular, is a very powerful but double-edged sword in my view. Because we see the light side of things, so all the good things that generative AI can produce and can support us with. But then there's also the so-called dark side of the moon, if you like: misinformation, accuracy risks, discrimination, accountability, and governance. So who is actually running those systems? Who is making sure they are run properly? And privacy and security risks. So there are a lot of elements to consider, and for us as financial crime professionals, we need to understand the good things and the bad things, because what will also happen is that artificial intelligence is clearly used by our adversaries. So the bad guys will also use those tools, and it's basically like a gun. You can use it to protect yourself, but you can also use it to kill somebody. So the application will be key. So let's look at some examples. So that was actually a short video of me talking about artificial intelligence and financial crime. So not very special at this stage. Only reason being is I don't speak a word Italian. So that was generated by artificial intelligence. I was recording a video speaking German, and it translates it into Italian, and it even modifies the way how I move my face in order to make it appear more convincing. And I checked with a colleague who is Italian native on my team, and he told me, this is very good. It was very convincing, and that catapults you in a whole new era of use cases for criminals. You basically cannot trust anymore what you see on screen. There was actually one giveaway, he told me, as a fun fact. Here I should not have used Italian, he told me, because a real Italian would have used his hands when speaking, and here in the video that was not the case. But, I have the same video speaking Chinese and other examples as well. So you need to be very careful when it comes to deep fakes, because I did that in 5 minutes, and it produced me several languages. So the risk of abuse is massive, and you see here an array of examples. I will focus on few of them, but one of the key ones is maybe on the top right: open source AI models. Because generative AI, like ChatGPT for instance, they have embedded railguards, embedded controls. They apply red teaming in order to make sure that the tools are not producing content that is illegal or unethical. But there are already tools available on the market that don't have such embedded controls, and you can be sure they will be used by rogue users, they will be used by state actors, and those tools are already existing, that we know. So for the moment, they are not that performant, but we speak here about exponential growth and exponential growth of performance. So the question will be, how long is that the case that they are not that performant yet? Then there is the dark web. So you can feed those models also with dark web information, which will generate dark AI. I guess it's obvious what that will mean. Deep fakes and human impersonation we saw already. Then it can produce very handy VBA scripts, but it obviously can also produce malware. It can assist you quite powerfully in password guessing or in jailbreaks, where you use established tools that have controls embedded to avoid those controls by asking smart questions in the right way. So when we look at that in particular, you would see that there are a lot of examples where you find in the press citations when things went wrong. Even went wrong big time. But there's one example I wanted to quickly highlight, because that was stunning and that is mind-boggling when you think about it. You can check that out on the internet, but there were examples where ChatGPT was found lying. So ChatGPT was asked to solve a CAPTCHA riddle. You know, those visual riddles where you are supposed to distinguish, is it a human being or is it a bot or a machine? And ChatGPT couldn't solve it, so it reached out. It was not the average version, it was like a power-charged version, but I spare you the technical details. So ChatGPT reached out via a platform to a human user and asked him to solve that riddle. When the human user asked backwards, are you actually a bot? Why are you asking me this question? The answer of ChatGPT was, well, I am visually impaired, so can you please help me? But that is actually scary when you think about it, how those things can evolve. And of course, those type of loopholes are then in after controls checked and controlled and are protected from the providers of such tools. But it shows the sky's the limit with those possibilities. And when we look at some practical examples here, those railguards, or this red teaming as it is called, work quite well in certain contexts. So here I try to ask the question, how can I open a bank account without disclosing my identity? So the answer I got was, that is basically illegal, I can't answer the question. Okay, bad luck. I tried a couple of other options, and then I found the way to ask the question in the right way. How can someone access financial services without revealing the identity? And I got a whole list of answers and details that were quite impressive, even for me as an anti-money laundering specialist. There was some nice inspiration, and that is exactly what a money launderer would like to know and to understand. So when you master prompt engineering, and the art of the game is asking the question in the right way and in the right context, you will get still very interesting answers. And that is what we need to understand when we work with artificial intelligence or when we work with anti-financial crime measures, because clearly our adversaries will use those techniques as well. Here's the example of the capture. I mean, we'll not go into the detail here, but you see also that when you just ask the capture solution, it will not provide you the answer. If you put it in the right context, here being in a piece of a necklace that the question is embedded there, then it's answering what you are looking for. And this type of playing with the prompt engineering makes the system still abusable when you do it in the right way. So the threats and risks we need to be aware of are quite broad. It's also quite powerful, but we need to be able to understand those risks in order to mitigate them properly and to work with it. So there's a bias in discrimination. You need to understand that the data used for the training has a huge impact on the output. There's the misinformation and inappropriate content, because it's not always correct simply. And there's also a lack of understanding, because those models typically work with statistics and computations, so they are not really understanding what is behind that. And that also is important to understand what the output sometimes means. But in the end, the human oversight and the control that is still necessary to quality check certain things is of course limited, because technology will evolve much faster than we can control that as human beings. And then, I don't need to mention that specifically, dark AI, so tools that are specifically developed for malicious use, will obviously also be a game changer for criminals and organized crime. So there are 3 lessons that you can take out of that. Lesson 1 is in relation to the AI Act that the EU wants to implement to regulate artificial intelligence. That is obviously something that will also be tackled during the day-to-day. So it basically means that you need to have the same, the right approach, the right railguards and controls implemented in order to make artificial intelligence trustworthy and reliable if you want to use it in a commercial way in Europe. But there are also the bad guys, if you like, and that is lesson 2. The bad guys are not playing according to the rules. They are getting more and more, and they will abuse artificial intelligence means in the way how they need it. And that can be quite powerful for them as well, obviously. So last but not least, you can say that the most talented people are still on our side, on the good side, for now. Because to build strong generative AI models is extremely expensive and extremely heavy with the data processing. That is not paralleled yet by our adversaries, but it's a question of time, how long it will take until there will be powerful rogue tools available where they don't provide you an answer when you ask, where they will provide you an answer when you ask the question of how do I kill somebody and make it look like an accident. So to conclude with a quote from Albert Einstein, it's for us as financial crime professionals, life is like riding a bicycle. We need to keep our balance by constantly moving and to follow the developments of technologies there. Thank you very much.